Welcome to another Azure Centric Podcast on our Azure Weekly Update show. My name is Marcos Nogueira, and with me I have Andrew Lowes, my best friend, Andrew Lowes. How are you, my friend?
I'm very good. I'm very good. How are you doing this beautiful day?
I'm fantastic, but apparently, and I have to say to all of you that it's not on purpose, but we changed the scenario as well. In this case, you did.
We did. So last time we did, you went out on the road and I stayed at home to hold down the fort. This time you're holding down the fort and I'm on the road. And I think maybe in one more week or two, we might mix it up yet again and see if we can throw some more variables in. But
Exactly. Exactly.
indeed, we may delay our release in this case a little bit on this episode, but in fact, nor rain, nor sleet, nor snow, nor beautiful summer weather, or smoky Alberta conditions, nothing will stop our podcast. So
Absolutely. Even my accidental of upgrading my Windows 10 machine to Windows 11 will not stop this podcast. It might delay, but it will not stop the podcast. And
it's
that's
a
the
worthy
beauty
it's
of
a worthy upgrade.
technology.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to, and I have to admit it's been very busy with kind of traveling during these still on the tail end of COVID times is a bit complicated still, but not too bad. I have to say a little bit of a shout out to WestJet for doing a really good job of making a tough situation very enjoyable, and everybody, though wearing a mask, you could clearly see they were smiling. So really well done, made it very enjoyable.
Yeah.
But today we do have
A team.
kind of, yes, right. So uh, there's a little bit of some previews, but I think networking and maybe if we drill down a bit more, we could even say ExpressRoute might be kind of on the mind this week. There's been some really interesting things,
Yeah.
and it's been, though not a heavy week for like the number of articles and updates, there has been some really good information that's come
Yeah.
through. So,
I have to say that to add to that is our favorite, in this case, product or feature in Azure Week. So apparently, Azure Migrate and Azure Site Recovery, they decide to um, increase the interest of this week. So that's the theme for this episode. Although um, all of this it's not possible without without your support, right? And I missed that part.
oh no, I'm hiding part of the
That's okay.
subscribe
That's
logo.
okay. Fix it. I'm
That's
going to
our,
do again. Do
we
you want to do
adapt
it?
on the fly.
Three, two, one. The support of our friends and our listeners to subscribe the channel.
So
Um,
we had some really good feedback.
yes.
I think the last couple of episodes, right? So not to get distracted, thank you very much to all of our listeners, watchers, subscribers, and passersby just coming through the neighborhood, browsing, listen to the video or the podcast for a little bit. We really, really love that you can join us for a little bit and we get to share our week and a little bit of Azure musings, I think is the
Yes.
right word, right?
Absolutely.
Yes. So yeah, we really love it, and please, weigh in the comments on the Azure Centric YouTube page. It goes a long ways to keeping us motivated and encouraged, and we absolutely love. It doesn't mean you have to say that you love us. That's okay too, but
Yeah, you took my words. You took my words. We want you to share what you think. We are always a positive fellas, and even from the most destructive criticism, we always try to take the best of it. So,
Right? Yeah.
so to
We find the sunshine in all these little things that happen in life.
absolutely, absolutely,
Wonderful.
and with that, I think it's time for us to start our podcast. So let's roll. So welcome back, and let's start with our first update. And our first update, as you mentioned, Andrew, is the general availability of Azure ExpressRoute Global Reach to new locations. In this case, is South Africa, Johannesburg only, and Taiwan.
Mhm.
So another two, in this case, new ways that you can connect to Azure through Azure ExpressRoute in South Africa and Taiwan. So I think if it was the last episode, it was a couple of episodes ago that we mentioned three new ones. So at that
That's
time
right.
we had 75 or whatever was it. Right now we are almost reaching 80
That's right.
locations to just connect your express route to your data center. Pretty cool, I have to say.
Exactly, right? Yeah, and we're really starting to reach kind of that worldwide mesh redundancy
Yeah,
when it comes to options available for how we can create BCDR strategies and how we can interconnect different Azure locations together so that Microsoft backbone has really become very reliable. It was quite a while ago, I want to say many months in my memory. I think it was Mark Rusinovich's article on Azure Backbone and the POPs and the different access points, the point of access. And in that article, he spoke about really extending not just connectivity, but the interconnectivity between all of the Azure data centers, um, region to region,
yeah,
and certainly within each region. So
yeah,
it's been fantastic the last few weeks to see these ExpressRoute Global Reach updates popping
yeah.
in. It's really great.
And it's just to reinforce what we already been discussing throughout this show. Is this is the entrance to getting into what we call the Azure Black Fiber. So you are entering into the Azure world in this case, and you can have all the advantages that you have by entering into this. So yeah, it's a kind of a short update, but we don't want to miss it because it's really important for us to do that so we can show off in this case the global reach that Azure is having and adding two extra points in this case with all of that connection to Azure, right? Yeah, I think it's important to mention over here for all of you that right now we have two extra entry points to the Azure world or to the Microsoft, let's say, to the Microsoft cloud services,
There
because
you go.
that is usually the entry point, right? But doesn't it's not only for Azure. You can leverage that for Office 365, right? As well, or in this case, should we say to the Microsoft 365 cloud services to be able to leverage all of that. So it's really the entry point to the Microsoft Black Fiber and using all of that good fiber that goes around and around the world. I don't know how many times. Um, yeah,
Probably far too many.
far too
I think there's
many.
quite a lot.
Far too many. Absolutely. So moving to the next one, and we starting our one of our ways. This is not an update per se, okay? It's still coming on the update blog, but it's the general availability of introducing global disaster recovery via Azure Site Recovery. So this is basically, it's not a new feature, okay? It's nothing that they are announcing. It's more like a reinforcement saying that Azure native platforms, they are always have the capability of the availability and disaster recovery, okay? And they are continuing on that progress with the highest levels of resilience, okay, by enable zone to zone disaster recovery, Azure to Azure disaster recovery, and even cloud to cloud disaster recovery. Okay, besides of course the on premise. So it's not an update, but we want to mention because it's one of the, I think it was the feature that I did you bring over the Azure, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
You've got it. Yep, we're talking about
Yeah.
high availability, and really the ASR is often the entry point
Yeah.
for a lot of customers for Microsoft Azure, right? Because when we think of Azure Migrate, it's in this case. Let's keep them separate, right? So in this case, ASR is really used to replicate data from somewhere. Can be Google Cloud, can be on-prem, can be right here in a home office or wherever. And you're replicating that to an Azure tenant. So that's really the entry, like the first time people are getting into Azure. So that DR strategy is okay. So my power goes out here, my battery backups run out. What then, right? Do we put in generators? Do we build in all these redundancies? What about the fiber connectivity? What happens with that? Is my provider going to be as robust as me running a generator for 2 weeks? Well, I don't know. You have to talk to your provider about that tricky question for
Absolutely.
sure. But
Yeah.
that said, when once we're in Azure, you may say, oh, well, let's replicate this region to another Azure region. So maybe you go from, let's say, Canada Central to South US, just as an example. And you may say, okay, that's enough physical distance, and the likelihood of both of those regions being impacted by a natural disaster or something else is very low. So maybe you do ASR between those two sites. And that's really what we're talking about, is the flexibility. So the more that dark fiber between all of the sites, I think most of them, if not all, are at 100 gig on the backbone now. I think it's presented in some cases still at 10 gig for consumption, but I do believe between regions it is 100 gig now. Don't hold me
Yeah.
to that. There might be the odd exception, I'm sure. But either case, I'd be quite happy to have 10 gig back and forth to be able to replicate data. Quite often it can be done in very near real time, if not pretty thin margins on that timing. So there's so much flexibility. The speed is there, the bandwidth is there. It's like Azure has done a very good job of positioning themselves as a full and comprehensive DR strategy, right? Worldwide, in fact.
Yeah, absolutely. And this it's going back to something that we already mentioned a couple of times at the show, on different episodes, from this show or this podcast. That is like, it's this starting to remind me the origin of all of this. That is Hyper-V and the Hyper-V replica.
Yep.
So it goes back probably like 10 years, a little bit on that time, 10 or even more years, that when they introduced the Hyper-V replica to just basically be able to protect your workloads from one data to another, at that time. And it was very cool because I remember a couple of us that we were speaking at one tech ed, that we were at the hotel, and through the wireless, we were transferring VMs to help one another. In this case, of building those labs to present on TechEd. I remember doing that with another colleague that he needs some help building some of those VMs, and I say, sure, I can do that. But it was during the night, and he was with his wife on the room. Instead of going, we just connected to the network. We got the IP of each other, and basically I was able to transfer all of my VMs to his laptop, or to or I think it was the laptop that he had at that time. And there you go. And the next morning, he had the lab working and was a huge success, for example. So from simple things like that to the what you can do it right now is a tremendous journey, and be able to see this on Azure, and be able to see this, that right now Azure, it's not only the cloud platform that we are seeing and working, it's still one of the leaders, if it's not the leader, on these type of things. Because um, I work with AWS as well. My knowledge on Google, on GCP, it's not that great, but on AWS and Azure, it's what I work every single day. And usually, AWS, yes, it's great when you're moving into AWS, but the way that you protect from AWS, which makes sense because it's it's a cloud service, right? It's a cloud provider. So if you don't trust your cloud provider, who is going to who will you going to trust, right? But
Yeah,
better than one cloud provider is two cloud providers. So
exactly. So
so
I think there's a difference there too, though, right? So it's one thing to trust our provider, and things like encryptions, uh, backup, backing things up, encryption at rest, encryption during transit, customer managed keys. These are all things that I think of when I hear the word trust and cloud provider. Now, in this case, I think of continuity, right? So I think of trusting the redundancies that they have built in. So will my VM stay up? And that's where we have to really kind of accept that, like by opening the plastic before you read the license agreement, you've already accepted the license agreement because you touched the plastic. Yeah, right. So it's a
yes,
bit like you have to understand those agreements, and sometimes there can be some confusion, especially if we're newer to that space, right? So when I think of how I like to try and explain this for my customers, I try to just keep it really simple when we talk about these things in this case, right? So I say, okay, imagine you have one rack in your own data center, then you have a second rack. Now, in each rack, you have one server with one hard drive. It's running, it's working great, but on the day that you have a problem, nobody's going to come and knock on your door and tell you that that hardware has just failed. You have to have things like monitoring in place, and you may want to have things like Hyper-V replicas, i.e. ASR, and you might want to have different detections that can help you fail over to rack number two on server number two, in case number one becomes unreachable or unavailable, right? So I think of, we have to, we kind of subscribe to these ideas that because we go to a cloud, public cloud, that it's just going to be perfect and it's going to be easy and everything will be there forever and always up. That's just not the case. They have hardware failures like everybody else does in their own data centers. The difference is, I think, for me, that Azure does a really good job. I guess in this case, Microsoft does a very good job of actually being very upfront and honest and says, you know what, Andrew, make sure that you build with proper architecture, that you understand uptime and downtime, and what that actually translates to for your customers.
Yeah,
So I think that way we've been very well
absolutely.
prepared, and we've been given the right tools to be able to build things like 4 nines for
Yeah,
uptime, right?
absolutely. And it's not only that, and that's a very good point. But it's not only that, it's like the possibility of you having, for example, even if you are on a multi-cloud platform or one of the region, is that region in this case becomes unavailable. Or even though with, for example, that is the new enhancement, or the most recent one that they did on ASR, the zone to zone. Because when you're doing region to region with ASR, there are a few changes that you need to address,
Yes.
and the main one is networking, right? Because the network cannot, in this case, go over the region. But when you're doing zone to zone, right? So we what we are saying in this case is you have, for example, three zones on that region that you have your workload running, right? And you are basically saying that a zone it's more like a data center in Azure. You have your workload running on one data center, and you are basically disaster recovery to another data center, which is what we're doing so far, right? Because in a lot of our cases, we kind of extend our network to the other data center, so we can have exactly the same type of, not the same range of IPs, so we don't need to change our IPs. So this is possible now within Azure. Of course, that if you are coming from any other region or any other location besides the same region, that's not possible because you need to change the IP when you're doing the disaster recovery. You need to change, but there is a lot of those type of things that there are, and we will see probably on the next update as well. On a few updates, let's say it this way, so we can in this case we can uh, uh, see it how the evolution goes and how you can not only bring, because if you remember the evolution of this, we start only with VMs. So Azure Site Recovery was only for VMs or for physical servers, and then they evolved that. So the next step, let's say the version 2, was for databases. So besides your physical servers, the entire server, right, that you can protect, now you can protect also databases. So means that you can recover easily and faster that database that you are running in on premise or any other location into ASR, right? And you will see more things to coming, but the natural evolution of this is is going to extend that to applications and to other things that we are talking about. Okay, but let's move to the next one because we are ready. It's always like that when we starting talking about ASR. We can be hours over here, and that's not the intention
We do
of
get a
this
bit
of
excited
this
about
episode
ASR.
or
Yes.
if this podcast. Moving to the next one, we have general availability of Azure VPN Client for macOS. What a great way for me to leave macOS and going to Windows.
I didn't want to point that out. I thought it might be a little bit too much
but
sharpened, maybe, but
so
I'm glad that you can chuckle about it. That makes me feel a lot better, to be honest. Yes. So, I mean, joking aside, this is really actually quite great
it is.
because we do have a lot of Mac users. Typically we see them in both marketing, sales, and government for specific purposes, right? Um,
Yep.
Windows, let's say 11 now almost has the corner on the market for business. But there's a strong number of Mac OS clients out there, like laptops and MacBooks and all those good things. So really, really great release here. And the thing I think that really jumped out for me is that my favorite thing of MFA through conditional access rules is okay, maybe it's not my favorite thing, but it is a very powerful and important thing that we have in place for our Azure AD tenants, that we are properly using and deploying conditional access based MFA for
Yep.
those tenants to protect them. So this is really, really great. It integrates right with the point to site VPN. And I have to say, I actually did install point to site inside a Hyper-V VM on my Windows 10 workstation for a client last week to access their systems. And on the Windows 10 version, super easy, really nice, especially if you're able to deploy it through Intune. You can wrap a nice package around it to integrate the settings and automatically have the configuration just there for the users. So really, really impactful, really nice interface. I have to say, it's everything I wish VPN has always been.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not only that. It's like, for example, I know a lot of developers, and that they use macOS to develop as well with Visual Studio, with all of that, and sometimes, for example, they are using. I used to use my. I still have my macOS, my MacBook Pro, and I do a lot of those connections, and be able to have these now, and be able to connect securely to our environment to manage and have all of those applications. It's another step. So that's my laptop when I'm going traveling. It's my MacBook Pro. So now I already download this, but it was funny when I saw this update coming. It was on the same day that I did basically almost, um, not on the same day, but a few days later, when I did put my Mac OS to on a backpack, starting to get for travel, and replace with my desktop at my office. So it was funny to say, oh, you were waiting for me to just move to Windows again, so you can have now the Azure VPN client. But it was funny. But like you said, be able to have almost exactly the same way that we have Windows with native Azure AD authentication. Okay, be able to use the tokens, be able to use the conditional access associated with MFA, associated with user-based policies.
Mhm.
It makes basically no difference if you are using Windows or Mac OS.
Exactly. Yep. It's all
And
about identity, has nothing to do with the base or remote OS in this case. Really, really
exactly,
great advancements.
I think it is. And if you are seeing this through the YouTube channel, in this case, go visit the webpage, because there is the link that I use for download the Azure VPN client, and the setup. The good thing about this is I did try to have the same setup for Windows and Mac OS, and the good news is you don't need to change anything.
Yeah,
Okay,
the
so
client
you set up
translates
once,
everything
you
for
set
you.
up
Yeah,
once, and then it's your client. Is the only difference is your Azure VPN client that you need to install on the Mac or on the Windows, that will do all of that good thing. So it's really great to see that. But yeah, but that's the part that I love about this update.
absolutely.
Moving to the next one, public preview on the Containerize apps and migrates to AKS and Azure App Service with Azure Migrate. And this is the part that we were talking about a few moments ago. Okay, this is the evolution that we always waiting for on Azure Site Recovery, and in this case Azure Migrate, is not only databases and the full servers. Now we're talking
Exactly.
about container apps or containerized apps to be able to migrate to AKS. Because if you think about that, it's going to be almost the same, right?
Yeah.
Having that on premise, and we see a lot of those, okay? And so far, the only possibility that you have with this was you having CI CD, right? But you need to redeploy the entire infrastructure on AKS to do that. So you need to deploy AKS on premise. You have all of that. You promote your code through the channels that you have, and then through that you're deploying to on Azure. Right now, you don't need to do that. It's still in preview again, so it's not when you're going to production. Please do not use this yet, okay? Because otherwise, you might get to a lot of things that it's not supported. It's on the best efforts, I have to say,
Yeah.
but it will allow you to already starting seeing what is coming next, right? To get
You
prepared,
betcha.
to get all of that, because this is the next step of migrating. So there are no more excuses. You can still develop on premise without any problem, but now you can migrate those apps that you have with this. And it's not only that, because the benefit of using this, it doesn't mention, okay, either on Azure documentation, if I remember correctly, but if you see this, okay, the Azure Migrate documentation, and even um, the about this update, it doesn't show, but you don't have the possibility to, or you have the possibility to migrate from other cloud services. So
That's correct.
GCP, it's really huge on
Containerization.
AKS, right?
Yeah.
So now you are Microsoft is saying yes, you can have no worries of developing, or if you want to migrate to Azure, sure. Let's use Azure Migrate to
Yeah.
migrate from GCP your AKS cluster, or AK not AKS cluster, the containerized apps
The containerized
to the
apps within.
AKS.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I think it makes sense too, though, right?
Yeah.
Because Microsoft is going to want people deploying their apps in GCI to come over to Azure. So this is one way that's going to help people assess those apps. Like you run the app assessment and all of those things, and it goes through. It's going to be very familiar if you've used Azure Migrate before. And when you go through the assessment, you see the things that are going to work, the things that have the kind of the yellow question mark beside them, you give a little bit of love to, and make sure you test it. And in this case, because again, like you said, it's in preview, so don't use this in production today. But if this is something that you're targeting, you're in a multi-cloud, or you have large AKS deployments in other, let's say, premises, then this might be a good option for you to take a look at if you're looking to move those apps into Azure, into a space where they can be better managed.
Absolutely. And it's not only that, the tool right now, what they are doing is, besides all of the process that everyone knows that Azure Migrate does, the tool will also helps to parameterize the application, the configuration of the application, and even goes even more to just help to configure the application monitoring using the application insights. So
Absolutely.
it's
App
it's
Insights is
really
awesome.
it's really going, when you migrating all of this, to have what is the best practice and what is the recommendation that Microsoft have, following the well architecture framework, to have that container monetized, so you can know what is going on and to see if really you are optimizing your application, your container through the environment. So it's not only like for like, let's call it this way. I hate those that expression, but it's not like for like. It's like, okay, let's migrate, but let's put this
So
on a better condition.
I have a different way. I don't know that it's better, but it's just a different way to describe it. Um, I hear terms like rehost versus refactor, right? So in this case, it's kind of a mix in between. So it really is not a full rebuild, but let's say if you are going to go from hard coded and then parameterizing your app to move into AKS from .NET or a Java application that Azure Migrate can assess, then yes, that is a bit more towards the refactoring side, right? But it's cool because it's not a rebuild, it's not manual, you're not rewriting all of the code. You get all of the suggestions and support through the Azure Migrate tool on what you likely need to do to parameterize. That's so terrible. The app.
Yeah, the app configuration.
I'm done mispronouncing
No,
things now.
that's that. Oh my god! If my mispronounce, now imagine me, right? But
I think you nailed it though,
exactly
buddy.
that.
So
So a lot of times by parameterize the application configuration or even to externalize the file system dependencies, okay,
yeah,
it's not considered a refactoring, because refactoring you are changing a little bit theoretically, right? You are changing a little bit of the architecture by changing code and something like that, but you are enhancing and you are adjusting your environment to get better, to get more productive, to get more from the resources that you have. That is absolutely an enhance that you can have on your infrastructure, right? With all the things that AKS that in some cases we already mentioned over here at this show, um, but it's with all other things associated when you already moving. The application monitoring is already there through application insights. It's tremendous because now, besides moving, you can see if your all of those small changes to try to get your app more or faster in this case, or more resilient, or whatever it is that you want to do it. It's if it's applicable or not, or if you need to adjust it even more. So it's
yeah,
pretty cool to see that on still on preview, right?
it is. But I think we have maybe a little bit more to talk
Yep.
about with Azure
It
Migrate, if that's even possible.
it's it yes, it's the segue for the next one. That now that we are not talking about infrastructure, we're talking about the public preview. Then and the two are end together, um, with the discovery and assessment for ASP.NET web apps with Azure Migrate. So,
Absolutely.
assuming, like you said, that Azure Migrate will unify the discovery and the assessment capabilities for servers, database, web apps. Now it allows you to discover what you have on-premise ASP.NET running on IISs to now migrate to the app services, to the Azure App Services, which is pretty cool because sometimes we don't know what we have, and it's good. But the all of this, and that's the part that I love it, is until now they can do this on the private preview, on the public preview in this case. They can do this with no agents being deployed. That
That's right.
is that is when I saw this, I say, So ASP.NET, it's a website, right? Basically.
Well,
Uh,
it's a language, but yeah.
it's a language, but it's running on IIS servers. So
Yep.
with no agents, right? You have to scan your network to just looking for web servers, looking for all of that, then to go and analyze if you have .NET on that servers, and then need to analyze if you have ASP.NET, and then grab all of that with all the dependencies of the DLLs and all of that to just give you that and to give you all the scheme that you need from your web server, right?
Yep.
And then let's say that they want to discover, they want to assess and say, yes, if you press this button, I can replicate what you have right now with all the web configs, with all the app configs files to a app service on Azure. It just blows my mind because uh, we've been on a few projects and moving
Oh
web
boy.
servers,
Yep.
and it's a simple task, okay, but at the same time very complex
It is,
because
right?
we
Yeah,
always miss
if we have to
something, right?
rebuild and then actually migrate manually the site,
Yep.
it's all those little dependencies, like you say. That's a DLL here. There's a DLL hiding over there. There's a parameter file there. There's no end to it on some of those systems. It can be quite complex in larger environments, or vertical applications that they've built for line of business, right? A lot of those are adapted over time. So version 1, version 5 documentation, let's say, bears very little resemblance to what you actually end up moving. So you read the docs, you try to follow along and make sure you capture all the stuff, you test it, and it doesn't even start the site. So yeah, having a tool like Azure Migrate to actually kind of, it's like an overlay, right?
Yeah.
And it's able to find all those little dependencies. It's able to trace everything, and then to be able to take that, move everything, help you kind of host it in like Azure App Service or IaaS, whatever you're going to use, and then wrap everything with App Insights so that you can actually get those deep analytics, right? And understand where the bottleneck is, not just that my site is slow,
Yeah.
but actually see, it's this DLL right here. It was this specific function call where we saw a delay. And now you can really zero right in on it and try and problem solve that. So yeah, really, really good enhancements that are coming through. And again, the last two, though very related with Azure Migrate, they're both in preview.
Yeah.
So just a note of caution, not quite ready for production,
Yeah.
but certainly go and explore those features in your dev test and learn about how that analysis and how that assessment, the discovery and assessment, works with the ASP.NET
Yeah.
web apps. Really great.
It's really great. But there was another announcement bearing on this one that with this preview capability that they are doing with ASP.NET is if you are running all of these on your VMware environment, okay, this capability will discover any .NET web app running. Not only ASP.NET, but any .NET web app running on your VMware environment, and will assess that and the recommendations at scale for either Azure IS or Azure App Service, which is amazing. So besides doing all of that, now you have the App Service Migration Assistant, very similar like you have the Database Migration Assistance that will analyze, like the migration does, what is your schema, what is your database, what is that you have inside to go and see this. And now it extrapolates to all the .NET web apps that you have, which is pretty cool. So we will start to see a lot of those coming. I want to play with this as soon as possible because it really changed the way that we can migrate
Absolutely.
and re-hosting, because theoretically when you do Azure Migrate, you are basically re-hosting in this case, although it's going to be that hybrid one that is re-hosting and refactoring, because the end
Exactly.
product is going to be a PaaS service, not a IaaS service, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, I think if our friends at VMware are listening or watching this episode, I feel like both of us will be asking for some more trial licenses for vCenter very soon.
Yeah. Or other than that, or if that is not possible, send us some swag. We appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yes, I really, it's so funny. You were talking, I know I haven't had a major diversion yet, so it's overdue. I'm so sorry, but it's about to happen. So you were talking about Hyper-V Replica, and I couldn't help. My mind wandered a little bit, and I know yourself and a couple of other MVPs that are very kind of near and dear to my heart. They really have helped me on my technical, but also my career and kind of discovery journeys, really, right? And I feel, almost an emotional attachment. I guess it is an emotional attachment, but it's a bit deeper than that. And then I'm going through these thoughts so rapidly, and all of a sudden I thought to myself, I remember a demo that a certain fella did when we were at Ignite one year, and it's down on the floor where they have the hands-on demos, those little 30 and 60-minute demos. Um, a handsome, smart fella who might be beside me on the screen right now did tell me did tell me one day, Andrew, what are you doing going to all these classes? You can do classes anytime and watch them later on after the Ignite is over. Why don't you go down to the floor and you can do the hands-on labs? You can actually, get dirty and kind of get into stuff, right? And I was like, okay, that's great advice. This is coming from somebody who's been around for a bit. They know this environment. Let me get down there. I have never looked back, not once. I've never been back to an Ignite classroom, only if Mr. Snover is speaking. I will admit that. But also, that Hyper-V replica story, a certain somebody was doing a demo on crypto recovery
Yeah.
and Hyper-V, which of course was very resonated very deeply with me at that time. And I was able to kind of get from there to, I haven't had a new T-shirt for 3 years. Yes, that's right. A 2-minute story about why haven't I had any new T-shirts?
Yes, and the funny of that is all of us MVPs, and it was some kind of trend on Facebook from a lot of colleagues saying that where you buy T-shirts, because when we usually get restocking those T-shirts on those events, absolutely.
I don't know what I'm going to do for undershirts this winter. I might have to go to a mall.
That's okay. That's okay, my friend. I can point you to some stores if you want. They don't say Hyper-V, not even Replica, not even Azure, but they are as pretty as the shirts that you have that wearing now. So
I just see
that's okay.
myself in like Old Navy or something, and I'm going to be asking, "Where's your Microsoft T-shirts?" I don't.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving to the
Oh
to
gosh,
the next one before we start to deviate too much.
too
Um,
much.
Automatic Azure VM extension upgrade capabilities is now in GA. So
Absolutely.
this is a great way to finish our show this week with this update, saying that now the Azure VMs extensions, that they are nothing more than small applications, right? Now they are the ability to upgrade those VM extensions on either Azure VMs and on the virtual machine scale sets
Mhm.
automatically. So, which is
Absolutely.
awesome.
Yeah, I was really happy to see this in here this week because I know with scale sets, it has been a little bit of a pain in the past. Little bit of kind of sequencing the work, taking one down, upgrading, pulling another one out, like you have to kind of it's like shuffling a deck of cards a bit, right?
Hmm.
So this is really good though because not only does this work for Windows, but this also works for Linux extensions as well.
Yep.
And even better than that, if you, for example, know that there is a potentially problematic upgrade that's on the way, perhaps your scale set is running a specialty application and you need to be very careful with how it updates, you are able to opt out of specific upgrades. So it's actually really, really great. And it allows for quite a lot of flexibility for organizations.
Absolutely. And it's not only that, it allows you to be more secure because you are up to date, right?
Exactly.
And that's been something that we've been preaching a lot regarding the part of the security, because high 90% of the attacks is between the date that someone release or announce a vulnerability and release the correction of that vulnerability and the time that you're applying, right?
That's correct.
So now we can reduce that time. So by that we are reducing, in this case, our vulnerability into the world, and we are increasing the security. So absolutely, that's why
Exactly.
I was saying that it's one of the best ways to finish this episode. And with that, sadly, we finish our episode. So yeah, I have nothing more to say than thank you, Andrew, one more time. And now
Oh,
it's
thank
your
you,
time to be
Marcos.
on the road. I think next time we both should be on the road, so no one takes an advantage.
I'm not sure it's an advantage, but I will say it is a good challenge for the hardware. Yes.
It is. Yes, yeah, absolutely it is. And yeah, thank you so much. So if you are new at the channel and if you come into the end of the podcast, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to smash that like button. Give us, share some love. If you have something to say, just say it. If you don't want to be publicized on the web, send us an email, private message. Um, a smoke sign right now, it's not very useful because
We
we have a
won't
lot of
notice that.
smoke,
Yep.
and that could be uh, buried in the other smoke. So besides that, just contact us, right?
Absolutely. Yep. Just get a hold of us. Let us know what you think. We love hearing everything that you may have to say. Um, yes. Tell Marcos what you think of his beautiful shirt this week,
Yeah.
or my very much bumblebee attracting shirt that I wore for some reason today. Whatever you want to say. The
Exactly.
point is that we really do love having you with us. We super, super do appreciate having all
Absolutely.
of you join us, and you are the sunshine that makes the day worth recording for today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much once again, and um, bye for now. Bye.